Hello, and welcome to Minute of the Apes, the daily podcast where we break down every damn dirty minute of the Planet of the Apes movies, 1 minute at a time. I'm Todd, and as always, Richard and Sean are sitting across from me.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
So we are at minute 96, but before we jump into that, we have to do what we do on Mondays, which is to say thank you to the Star Wars Minute guys for kind of stirring the pot and getting this whole thing really going, as well as go check out our brother and sister shows at moviesbyminute.com. You'll find just about anything that you like in the nerd stratosphere where somebody's going to break it down like this. You can find those movies there. Trust me, there are tons of them.
And if you don't see your favorite movie there, why don't you start your own podcast?
That's right. Go become a podcaster yourself. So, without further ado, I don't think we have any other housekeeping to do before we start. So on this fine Monday morning, Sean, why don't you tell us what we have going on at minute 96?
We're going to start minute 96 with Cornelius saying a stage of primitive barbarism dating back some 1,300 years, roughly, and ends with Zaya saying your methods of dating are crude. And as of minute 96, we've got 2 living humans, 2 confirmed dead, a shrewdness of apes, and a gaggle of humans.
So since I screwed up last week by going too far ahead, can I start this week by making my point about Cornelius's comment again?
Yes.
Do you want to do that too?
No, well, because I stopped you. I cut you off from talking about it last week.
And I was wrong. You were right.
But I stopped you from cutting off about it last week. But it is such a unique comment that... Go ahead.
Well, I mean, nothing more than the fact that to this point we've had a lot of when the scrolls were written, this kind of thing. And just in the moments before with Zaius, we pointed out the years. How long? What was it? 1,200 years?
1,200. It was Taylor who asked.
Yes.
Why did Taylor ask?
Because Taylor's a man of the world. He likes to know the ins and outs of his religious landscape.
He's an ANSA man. They want facts. Figures.
But, so it was 1,200 years ago, but the digging goes 1,300.
Correct. We have a whole century there. It was just so you go back and look at that, and that was it was just a device. It was there was no reason for Taylor to ask the specific date of the scrolls, or them to offer a specific date up in such a way. Right. It was all just set up. There was no point.
Yeah. Does anyone ever, when they talk about the Bible, does anyone ever say when was this written? And maybe we know because of the accepted calendar and all that, but still, you don't have a lot of people ever ask that question. So it is the most nonsensical, and for Taylor to give a shit about anything too.
Right.
And technically, the Bible wasn't written 2,000 years ago. There was parts that were written later, years after that, and then there were parts that were assembled by the church, and parts were ignored. And
exactly.
So come on. Whatever. Sorry, we're not into a minute of the Bible.
Minute of the Bible.
Yeah. Were we going to do that? Minute of the Bible?
Yeah.
I can't do that one. I'm sorry. No.
Scripture a day.
Ugh, no.
I think that exists somewhere.
We're
not doing it, but I mean.
I'm almost positive it does too. Anyway, so we have that. We have them walking along in this. When it's these diggings go 1,300 years back, does that not send a red flag up for Taylor? Wait, hang on. You wrote these 1,200, but your diggings find men 1,300 years ago. Would you not immediately start thinking,
why is a cutoff there? What happened before that?
And now, and to the point, and we'll get into this in the coming minutes, he does have at least not a eureka moment, but he has questioning moment. But,
well, you say men, but that's not mentioned in this particular minute, right?
No, and I'm surmising with it all, but he learns within this. It just seems very odd to me that he's just asked about 1,200 and got the answer 1,200 years, and he doesn't immediately go, hang on. So you're telling me this was 100 years before you? He's not questioning these things. It's set. The scene is set. This whole scene, and we can read from it in a minute, but it's all set so it's Cornelius's moment. The entire scene is pretty much Cornelius.
It is. I mean, he's really the only one talking, except for one comment from Zaius at some point.
Right.
So it's him, basically just Cornelius giving exposition about the stuff that he's found in his dig. Right. It's very dry. There's not really a lot that's exciting about it.
We found out that there's carnivorous gorillas at one point.
And you know what, to be fair, it is very dry, but we do get Roddy McDowell, probably one of a true standout moment for him, and he's had a ton, but you can even see those facial tics. He's all hunkered down, bow-legged. Mm-hmm. Even from a wide shot, he stands out. So it's dry, but he gets a chance to do something, and that's a lot of fun.
I was curious if if an audience watching this through would really piece together that Taylor had said 1,200 years, and would remember, 2 minutes later, 3 minutes later, that it dated 1,300 years.
Right.
I mean,
well, if we go back and watch the movie all the way through in one setting, it might actually make more sense to us because we're more distanced from those minutes because we've spent so much time examining 1 minute. It might stand out more when you watch it all the way through.
Well, it makes me think of, and this is I don't know if it's unfair, but since I do, and I hope I can say this, since I do the editing for the shows that are posted, I get to listen to them again. And we had the discussion about when you watch a movie, when you read a book, when you do anything like this, are there moments where the inconsequential chatter just fills your brain until you get to the next thing that propels you ahead?
Yeah.
And I wonder, did most audiences to that point, Richard, did they look at this and think, that's just folklore? They just were laying the groundwork for what this world was? Or were there people that actually were sitting there doing the math and having eureka moments for themselves?
Maybe. I mean, I'll admit when he was kind of going through the levels, I was trying to figure out exactly what he was trying to convey here. Like, I was level 1 that discovered traces of an early ape culture, stage of primitive barbarism, dating back to roughly 1,300 years. But it was this level I found cutting tools, arrowheads of quartz, and fossilized bone of carnivorous gorillas. So I assume he's talking about that statement, but he seemed to move around a little bit. It made me wonder if he was talking about 2 different levels. It's the next portion where he says, but the artifacts lying here were found at this level are date back 700 years earlier. So 700 years earlier than
the 1,300 that we've already seen.
So 2,000
That's what I wondered,
years,
too.
or is it really 700 years earlier than current time?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I wondered too. I was like, okay, they don't really define that enough for me to truly understand, but if I'm reading it at base level, it's 700 years before the 1,300 years.
Yeah.
And that's why he says this, that the paradox, the more ancient culture is the more advanced.
Yeah.
So I assume he's still talking about ape culture.
Right.
Yeah. Or he is assuming it's ape culture.
Admittedly, many of these objects are unidentified, but clearly they were fashioned by beings with a knowledge of metallurgy. So he said beings of metallurgy, so he's kind of hinting that they may not be apes.
Right.
But do you see where my confusion is? Because it almost sounds like the apes themselves regressed based upon the way he's talking about it.
I didn't think of it that way, but I can see that.
1,300 years we found this. 700 years before that we found an even more advanced culture.
Right.
We're assuming he's still talking about ape culture because he hasn't identified anything as human until he moves around a little bit further later on.
But
indeed, the fact that these tools are known to us could suggest a culture in certain ways almost equal to our own. Some of the evidence is uncontestable.
And to be fair, he pulls back the tarp. And beneath that tarp, we see a very large gorilla skull.
It's a gorilla skull, yeah.
We see a number of bones. There is a gear, a small wheel with gear cogs in it. There are things like that. And if you look in the distance, in that little pile, you see what looks like a little baby arm, which we will be revealed in later moments.
Right.
So I can see why you're saying that, but at the same time, there's some evidence here that to me, it's not apes.
Right.
I mean, he obviously has looked at these things before, and they're rib bones. They look much smaller than an ape would look.
It was the pulling back of the tarp and kind of revealing. Is that this particular moment when he reveals those?
I
When he
believe
pulls
so.
it back, seeing the gorilla, that made me think that he was still talking about a gorilla culture that was more advanced than the gorilla culture 1,300 years ago.
Yeah.
See, and I think that's just when I saw that, that's got to be a red herring.
Right, yeah.
Put that gorilla skull there so it still confuses the audience.
So
They're thinking,
why the gorillas more advanced?
True.
2,000 years ago, and then they devolved, and now we've come back again. What's
that
going
would make
on?
sense. If there was a little bit of a feeling like we're trying to go through this discovery phase, but if you really look at it, it feels like we're talking a little bit in circles. We're just trying to sound like, oh, here's something we found here, and here's something we found here, as opposed to actually kind of a timeline that we can map out.
But, I think that comment about the more ancient cultures, the more advanced, is very interesting in and of itself. Even if it were apes, that would give cause enough, if I'm an archaeologist, for me to blast your scriptures out of the water, saying, look what they did
Why
before.
was the not more advanced part covered in your scriptures? What happened? Yeah.
Why are we erasing ape history? So if that's what he thinks is this is an ape culture, that's something right there that I'm like, see you, Dr.
culture
Zayas.
800 years older than what they've recorded in terms of the scriptures.
And more advanced. What did we do to ourselves?
Yeah. So what did we lose in that 700
Well,
years?
that's probably why, Dr. Zayas jumped in there after Cornelius says some of the evidence is uncontestable. And he's like, don't speak to me in absolutes. The evidence is contestable. right? He's
Right.
ready to challenge this, whatever this notion is.
And I don't know if you noticed this, but in the background, Nova and Taylor, they both kind of take a seat because they know what's going to happen. It's speech time. People are just going to be arguing. They both take a seat, and Taylor's got something in his hand that we don't know that he's playing with.
And Nova is almost standing like a supermodel. She's flexed to one hip, her leg kind of out, like, whatever. But they aren't paying attention at all.
No.
I mean, the way that the five of them are kind of scattered about, the wide shots made them feel more like just kind of dressing to make the shot look visually interesting, as opposed to focusing on one person talking or an exchange between Zaius and Cornelius. We get a wider shot than they were kind of carefully placed around the room just so it looks like we're not in an empty room, because they didn't dress this room up. I mean, there's nothing.
No.
That original description of it's supposed to be kind of, having an altar-like feel.
Right.
Is not.
It definitely does not have that, and didn't have description of red beams of light or something.
Yeah,
we don't have any of that. But I think you're right. I think that they shoot this in a one shot so they can get a lot in the can, and one day they get 3 minutes done.
Yeah, true.
Because, again, Roddy McDowell's good enough. He delivers. And you think about this. I would cast every movie where I put my actors in ape makeup so that if they f up a line,
you can put anybody
I
in
can
there?
just overdub it, and you would never know it, and I can get everything in the can right like that. But it's not really that interesting, and the direction for our humans, to your point, is just like,
sit down. Here we go.
Yeah,
Story
y'all
time.
get out of the way. Don't do anything.
I also wanted Taylor at some point to go, oh, well, that's a toaster, and that's a martini glass, and oh.
Well, I mean, there's a, and we'll get to in a later minute. The placement that they sit down is definitely choreographed to be that moment, because there's some movement right there a little bit while later.
Right.
I found it interesting that Zaius kind of pipes up and says, "Don't speak to me in absolutes. The evidence is contestable," and Cornelius has to apologize. I apologize.
I thought that was a weird.
He gets really just kind of weak again.
It's why does he feel the need to acquiesce to that so quickly?
Because Zaius shut him down. I mean, he's excited about his discovery, hoping to convince Zaius of something, and Zaius is like, "No, sorry." And so Cornelius is like,
So in other words, he's the Sean of their group. That's the way Sean treats us. He just completely, nope.
Sorry.
You all hear this nice guy, and you don't understand behind the
Wait till
scenes.
the
He's
tapes
really
are
mean.
Yeah, wait till the mics are off.
Metallurgy.
right.
You mentioned that. That's another instance. Did apes learn to speak by reading a thesaurus? I can't even say it because
Did
no
you
one
learn to speak by reading a thesaurus?
I didn't learn to speak. No one really says metallurgy anymore. It would, and I hate to be this way, but the more practical way to speak is, and I even wrote this. Let me see. Most people would say something like, "These artifacts showed their skills at forging metals."
Yeah.
That's a more practical way to speak than metallurgy. I didn't have to look the word up, but still, I was like, I don't know that I've ever heard anyone use that word like that.
I think I would say that I've heard it before, specifically in discussions of
That's because you own a comic book shop.
Archaeology.
That's because you own a comic book shop.
People come in all the time
Talking about all the metallurgy that
exactly.
was
Well, yeah,
covered.
I guess when you think about it, yeah, they people cosplay and they make their own swords and things like that, and so I hear the word metallurgy.
Yeah.
And look, I again, I don't want to beat up the film, but it's just one of those odd choices. We've had it where Zaius has said things before, and it was
French terms or whatever,
yeah, and it was just another.
Apostate.
Yeah.
Yes, that was what. Thank you. I couldn't think of what the word was, but it's just another instance of, wow, what a good vocabulary these apes have.
Do you think they were still writing for? Because we've seen the evolution in comic books where we move from a kind of formal speaking with very simple sentences to now where conversations like the stuff Brian Michael Bendis writes are conversational, where it's like, what, huh, oh, great, cool, and there's no period, everything's a run-on sentence, and people have conversations. Yeah, they have conversations back and forth. And so maybe that's what stands out about this particular moment is they're still writing for this era as opposed to what we do today in the movie.
Yeah, and that's a great point because that will change over time. You definitely, you have Tarantino speak. You have any number of people that are going to put it in and make it more true to life. It's very much movie speak. It really is.
And I really don't think that whole 2 paragraphs are really meant to be mapped out. I think it was just supposed to be like an aha. So the audience is following, ooh, there's something he's discovering about the past and these things.
Right.
Because any more details would kind of begin to reveal exactly what's going on.
Right.
I'm pretty sure at this point, I've leaned over to my husband Chris and said, "Oh, I think I know what's going to happen."